What is up, everyone? Another beautiful yet semi-windy day here in Ohio. Yeah. Working on the S10 yet again. Nothing new in the neighborhood. Big project of the day. I got this box from a Holley. It is a Terminator X computer. ECU for LS engines. In this case, it's the 24 tooth version with the EV6 injectors, because what I got is the LQ4 iron block 6-liter from a truck model, whatever you want to call it. And it's the 3rd gen, technically LS, so that 3rd gen means it has a 24 tooth, but I upgraded to LS3 heads and intake, and that means it's going to have the EV6 injector style. So that's basically what you look for when ordering a kit per your engine. Make sure it fits your generation. 24 tooth for 3rd gen, 58 for 4th gen LS. Make sure you got all that sorted out, know what reluctor tooth count you have, and then know your injector harness. That's about all you need. Then you can pick if you want the little 3.5 inch dash screen or not. I opted to not get the 3.5 inch little monitor, dude, because I'm gonna end up getting either the 7 or the bigger screen in the future. So for now, I opted to not get that and just get the USB cable that plugs into my computer, because that'll be all I need for tuning and stuff. And then when I want to get the dash finished up, I'll just get the larger dash screen, and that'll be a lot easier to watch going down the track or doing whatever. A lot better view than the little screen. So I kind of already opened it up so I could get the instructions out and read through them, but I'll kind of pull everything out here. Here is, looks like the injector harness. So it comes with its own injector harness. It comes with pretty much everything: the ECU, the engine harness, a couple other loose wires and stuff, and it goes through all that in the instructions on what those are for. And there's a few optional things, but I'll probably take a few of those routes, like the fuel pump, for example. You can wire the fuel pump to a relay and then have it controlled by the ECU, so you don't have to have a mechanical switch for the fuel pump, which, if you've been keeping up with some of the other stuff, I have a bunch of switches and relays for other stuff. So if I can take something off my plate while I'm in the truck, that'll help out. I won't eliminate the chances of me forgetting to do something. So here, I believe, is the main harness. Here, like I said, are a few of the loose wires. These are power and ground, I believe. Yeah, this is the red and white is the switch on. So that's what you can send to your ignition switch. So when you want to start the car, you flip the ignition switch, whatever, that will activate the ECU. So that's what you run power to. Black is chassis ground for that ignition switch, I believe. This is the relay, I think, for the fuel pump, but I'm not 100% sure. And then here's the fuse for the ECU, all that stuff. Then the connectors, where it wires into the ECU, I believe. And again, the instructions have all this laid out in a pretty easy to read and understand fashion. But yeah, here's the main harness, and of course that's going to be the bulk of the install. Got all the connectors on there, and of course, the way you should do stuff, make it super easy to use and understand. Everything's labeled. So this is wideband O2 sensor, crank, coolant temp sensor, throttle position, intake air, or intake idle air controller, fuel pressure, I believe, oil pressure. So super handy. NOx sensors, don't need that. Your cylinder head ground, all this stuff, super well laid out. Thank you, Holley. Great job. Here's the, it comes with a Bosch wideband sensor. That's handy. And then of course comes with the here's a weld bung for that O2 sensor, and then it's got the computer has a map sensor, a 1-bar map sensor built into it, if you want to take that route. But if you're doing boosted, you might as well use a 2.5 or 2 or 3, whatever. And so I probably won't end up using the map sensor in the ECU, but they do send these little connector guys, so that's handy for that if you're running naturally aspirated or maybe just a couple pounds. Very handy. This is the inputs and outputs harness. So I think this is kind of, I don't know a whole lot about this. I need to read a little bit more into the instructions. I'm pretty sure this is for stuff that you want controlled by the ECU. You can add these wires onto the ECU and then send them to whatever relays or accessories you want, and then program that in the ECU if you want it to do whatever, nitrous solenoids, boost solenoids, stuff like that. So handy dandy. So this is a main power harness. This will plug to your ECU, plug into your ECU, and then go directly to your battery. They make a very big point about saying, and apparently it does actually damage stuff if you don't, but they say very strongly that you should connect this directly to the battery, not to a distribution block and a chassis ground, but rather connect the red and black to the battery, positive and negative. So just do as the instructions say, and you won't have to worry about it. Here's the USB/CAN harness. That's for your plugging in a laptop. Last but not least, we got the Terminator X itself. Oh boy, this is not safe. Don't cut towards yourself, children. In all its glory, Terminator X. Fancy. Simple. Sweet. So that blue line, like I said, that's for the built-in map sensor if you choose to use that. Pretty neat that they include that. They got lights on here that tell you stuff if you're into that. Your 2 connections for your main harness, and then your power connections on this side. Battery connection. Sweet. Got to figure out how I'm going to mount this. Probably going to mount it in front of the passenger seat, on that dash bar somewhere. Probably, is my guess. But I guess we'll get digging into it, see what we can do. Some stuff I don't have yet. I don't have off the top of my head, I don't have a coolant temp sensor. I don't have a map sensor. There are a few things I'll have to order before I can totally wrap up this Holley install, but we will see what I can do. Also, I don't have the headers and stuff done, so I can't do the wideband bung quite yet. But we'll at least do the main harness and maybe shed some light on that. And I will learn, and you will learn. We will learn together. It'll be a great time. Alright, so that there was the main harness. I got the main harness pushed through the backside, hooked up to the battery, cracked a terminal connection in the meantime, so I'll have to go buy another one of those. But got that main power harness run up through here and hung over the roll bar here, where it'll most likely be connected to the ECU, if I had to guess. And then while I was at it, went ahead and did the 2-inch hole saw through there. That is for, Holley recommends a 2-inch hole saw for that main engine harness pass through. So I went ahead, did that. So I'll go ahead and push that through here and pull that around and through my intake manifold and have all those sensors run through here and then spread out to wherever they're going. So for example, put cam, crank, whatever back here, oil pressure right there. So those will stay back there, and then we'll keep moving forward with, of course, throttle body. You got your TPS, and then idle air will all be on that bad boy. So yeah, that'll be the next step, main harness. Alright, so I got the main harness run through the firewall here. And I started to get stuff sorted. So like the wideband O2 is going to be over here on the left side. Crank positioner, crank sensor plugged in, cam sensor plugged in, injector harness plugged in and kind of set to the side for now, just so I can kind of get it sorted in my head. And what I started to realize is that there's about 4 or so sensors or adapters I need to order before I can really figure this stuff out. And once I have those, I can kind of permanently set that intake manifold, my sheet metal manifold, I can more permanently set that on here and really get stuff figured out, get the cylinder head ground bolted on, all that stuff. And so really being able to finalize that stuff is pretty important. So I'll probably go ahead and get that, maybe get the injectors, then I'll revisit this in a couple days when all that stuff shows up, and we can make some more progress on it. But for now, that's what I got. Main harness is through. I can start trying to mount the ECU, and I can start doing the wiring for the fire up, the ignition switch in there to the ECU, and then all that fun stuff. So that's probably what I'll get started on next. Okay, back again. Here we are. S10, it's a new day. And we got some new parts. Had a little bit of a change of heart. That's the old hole that I made, but I'm gonna probably end up using that for the water pass-through for the intercooler. I ended up going just straight through here because I think when I put in the rest of the firewall, I'm gonna make the hole through there. That'll make this a lot more streamlined. It can come straight through, straight over the engine. These are all the parts that need to be up in the front, throttle position, all that stuff, and then all those parts need to be in the rear. And this way just makes it a lot more logistic. It's a lot easier to handle this way. This way the rear head ground will be in the right spot, front head ground will be in the right spot. The crank sensor can go around the back of the engine versus down the side, which is easier with these taller valve covers, and I won't have to worry about the exhaust making it a million degrees. Easier for the oil pressure sensor back here, which that's the old one that I broke off. I had to break off that thing just to get a socket on here because it was pretty large and I didn't have a deep well socket, and I knew I wasn't going to use that sensor, so I went ahead, broke it off. Got that guy's loose. I'm just waiting for the adapter to the 8th NPT because that's what the Holley pressure transmitters have as 8th NPT. Easy for fuel pressure regulators because they generally have 8th NPTs for the gauges. You can just screw it right in and send that sensor back to your ECU, and so you can have fuel pressure's easy, oil pressure you need an adapter, or pull it from somewhere else, but I'm going to pull it from the factory spot, so I need an adapter. Other things I went ahead and did: engine coolant temp, I had to get a adapter for that, so I used the ICT billet adapter. That's M12 I think by 150 or something like that. M12 by 150 to 3/8 MPT adapter for the coolant, and then that guy, CTS coolant temp sensor, just plugs right in there like that. Of course, this stuff will have to dodge a little bit because that's right where my exhaust is going to come out, so we'll have to mess with that a little bit. And then here I've got the factory, I still might clean these up, they're a little bit dirty, but got the factory ignition coils just on this side set up just so I could take a look at it, see what it's going to look like. It's going to be hard to reach now, so I might have to get some longer plug wires, because these, again, are 2.5 inch, where the factory valve covers are like 1 inch. So might have to get some longer plug wires, not the end of the world. The other thing, I've got the intake off right here because it is going to need some work. This is why I haven't bolted it down yet. All the intake sensors, or at least 2 of them, are going to go down here. And there's 4 ports. I think if you want to, you could pull off here for your, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull one out of here, send it to my as a wastegate line, so that'll be my boost reference for the wastegate. And then one of these other ones I'll also use for the intake air temp, and then probably the other 2 I'll block off. Some guys, if you just have one, you could block all 3 of these and then have one come off to a distribution block. But for a coolant, for intake air temp, you want it in that manifold so that it gets the most accurate reading. Maybe up here might be a little more accurate, I don't know. I'm just going to do it back here. It'll probably be fine. And then on the back here, I'm 90% sure that's for the map sensor, which I got, so I will go ahead and try and get that plugged in. Alright, I was really hoping I could be able to bolt this guy on the truck today, have it kind of more permanently attached, but I forgot. This 3/8 NPT port, I still am waiting on my intake air temperature sensor. That shipped directly from Holley, whereas a lot of the stuff I ordered I was able to get the next day from a local supplier. So unfortunately I won't be able to bolt this down yet, but that should be the last sensor that I don't have. I believe I have every other sensor. Of course I don't have a fuel regulator yet, so I can't install that sensor, but I do have it. So, but I got my 2 ports plugged. I got the, I think this is 1/4 inch hose barb attached here that I'm going to send to a distribution block, and that'll be what I run my boost reference for my wastegates, and eventually in the future a boost controller, maybe a CO2 boost controller, the fancy one everybody uses. For now that's what I'll be using, just probably to run the wastegates. Then I got the GM 2.5 bar map sensor installed on the back here, which is super convenient that port is there. Makes everything pretty easy. Some other things I did the other day, now that this harness is in here, I went ahead and zip tied it to the roll bar where I'm pretty sure it'll be, and then I went ahead and took the green and red wire here. Those come from that Holley, the Holley harness. I attached them to my main harness and sent them down here. So there, I just kind of got those out of the way for now. That green controls fuel pump and the red goes to the fuse. It goes to the fuse from your battery, so you connect this end to your battery, and that's what actually powers the relay for your fuel pump if you choose to run your fuel pump off the Holley. The other thing I did, I cut the blue wire off and taped it up into the harness because I will not be using that. That's for if you're using a tack, I believe. And then the red and white striped wire and the black wire, I also sent those from the Holley harness to my harness and brought those over here where the red and white goes into this switch, which is the ignition switch. When I flip that on, that'll power the Holley up, and then this black wire is the ground for that, and so that I'm sending probably to just this roll bar ground right here. Alright, so a few more things got done. Got the ignition coils mounted on the heads. And of course these will have to come through the intake. So these, I'll have to unplug these, redo these again. But I'm just trying to get my spacing planned out here. Looks like this will be good. These are all the rear engine sensors. And then this is even side. Of course cylinders are 1 front right corner, and then 2 across, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is the even bank, this is odd bank. So odd plugged in, even plugged in, and like I said, these will go like that, probably something like that. They'll come up through the intake, through one of those guys, come up through there. That plugs in, rears are good. That's where the injectors will stem from too. So then got the odd side plugged in, and the front side will run up here. Then I got the extended the cylinder head ground, so I can ground it right there, like that. And then all the front sensors. Went ahead, got the coolant, temp sensor plugged in, but unfortunately that's really all I've got right now. I've got the throttle body sensors, but I can't lay the intake on until I get that intake air temp, because I don't want to bolt that down and then have to try and put a sensor on underneath. So yet again, waiting for parts. Everything else is ready to roll. So if you can see in here, my spare time the past few days, started putting together some sweet little brackets that bolt on the roll cage, and that'll be the mount for the Terminator. So that looks pretty cool. I'm kind of happy with how that turned out. Then of course these wires will loop around, swing down here. There's of course the USB plug-in, all that stuff. Now that's kind of right now hangs down, and this is kind of like diagnostic mode. You can see those top lights up here if you're working on it or just firing it up for the first time, like I will be before too long. But with these roll cage mounts, the nice thing is I won't be able to do it right now because it's bolted on pretty good, but I'll be able to push this and have it kind of swing up here and out of the way and hide a little bit, and I can tuck this wiring harness up in there. So that'll look nice when I'm able to tuck it out of the way. For now, it's pretty neat hanging down there. Looks pretty cool beside my switch panel and everything. So yet again, waiting for parts. I'll update you in a bit. So guys, we're pretty much wrapped up here on the Holley install for now. Like I showed you the other clips, I got the ECU mounted and wired into my switch, so it activates when I flip my ignition switch, and then that harness will come through the firewall there. The parts that I was waiting on, I went ahead and already installed my intake, so it's kind of hard to see, but if you see that brass fitting right in there, that's the manifold air temperature sensor. That came from Holley, so it took a couple days, but got that installed. And then my and then the adapter harness, I did end up needing an adapter harness. This is the map sensor in the back here, and I needed an adapter pigtail to go from the GM 2.5 bar to the Holley clip on the Terminator harness. Other than that, like I said, intake's installed. TPS and IAC, they just go right onto your intake. Along with this is that manifold air temperature. It's up here, so you just swing that, or I swung it back around. I got the injector harness plugged in, and I brought these guys through. Here's 1 and 3, and then 5 and 7, and then 2, 4 hidden in there, and 6, 8 back there. Ignition coming through the intake, plugs into these guys. Working on the fuel rails right now. Looks like I'm gonna need some different O-rings because these guys are a little bit too big. So I'll get those better O-rings and then hook up the injectors, and that's pretty much it for the install. Pretty simple. Pretty oh, and then the fuel, of course, I don't have the pressure regulator, but I do have the transmitter for that. And then you'll have one ground back here for this set of ignition coils. That ground will go somewhere on this head, and then you got one that'll go on the other head. So don't forget those. Pretty important they go right to the head, or else you'll be burning ignition coils from what I've heard. That's about it for the Holley install. Hopefully in the near future here I'll be able to fire up the old 6.0 and give her a rip. But for now, that's it. Yeah, so I definitely recommend the Holley stuff. Super easy, moderate, good prices on all of it, and hopefully someday we'll see it rip and we can really put it to the test. Other than that, thanks for watching. If you like the build, feel free to subscribe, and like the video, do whatever, you know, and have a good day.